Damian was upset, Ziggy was responsible, and the two brothers were no longer on speaking terms. That narrative spread fast, the way family drama involving famous people always does, filling in gaps with speculation because nobody involved had said anything publicly. And that silence is really what allowed the story to grow. When people don't have real answers, they build their own. So when Ziggy Marley finally addressed it directly in an interview, it was the first real, on-the-record response to weeks of rumors. Ziggy didn't dance around the question. He said plainly that he talks to his brothers every single day, and that drama simply isn't part of how their family operates. He acknowledged that Damian had other commitments that kept him away from the film's promotion, offering a far more mundane explanation than the fallout theory that had taken hold online. He also addressed the criticism the film received from critics, noting that while some of it might be fair, it didn't reflect how audiences actually responded to the movie, which was overwhelmingly positive despite a rougher reception from outlets like Rotten Tomatoes. Throughout the interview, his message was consistent. The family remains united, and the idea of a deep, bitter rift was simply not accurate. Of course, an interview denying a rumor doesn't automatically end public speculation. And it didn't here either. Some fans pointed out that busy with other commitments doesn't fully explain skipping every single premiere and staying completely silent on social media for a film tied to your own father's memory. Others noted that Cindy Breakspeare's exclusion from the final cut is a legitimate, separate issue worth examining on its own, regardless of whether there was ever a personal rift between the brothers. It's entirely possible for both things to be true at once, that the Marley brothers are not feuding in the dramatic sense the rumor suggested, and that there were real creative decisions in the film and real absences from Damian that fans are still owed a fuller explanation for. It's worth pausing on just how unusual this level of scrutiny actually is. Most families, even famous ones, don't have every missed event or quiet social media week turned into a headline about betrayal. But the Marley name operates on a different scale entirely. Bob Marley isn't just a musician to millions of people around the world. He's a symbol, a movement, and in many households, almost a spiritual figure. That means anything involving his children automatically gets filtered through the lens of legacy, loyalty, and inheritance, both musical and literal. A single missed premiere doesn't just read as one brother being busy. It reads as a referendum on whether the family itself is holding together the way fans desperately want it to. This is also why Ziggy's choice of words in his interview mattered so much. He didn't just deny a feud in passing. He specifically said the family speaks every day, which is a very deliberate, very pointed way of shutting down speculation. In families that are genuinely fractured, that kind of daily contact simply doesn't happen. People who study celebrity families and public image often point out that vague denials tend to fuel more speculation, while specific, concrete claims, like naming a frequency of contact, tend to close the story down faster. Whether or not that was a calculated media strategy or simply an honest answer, it functioned as a fairly effective response to weeks of tabloid-style build-up. At the same time, it's fair for fans to want more transparency around Cindy Breakspeare's exclusion from the film. She wasn't a minor figure in Bob Marley's life. She was the inspiration behind one of his most beloved songs, and she raised one of his most successful children. Leaving her out of a definitive biopic isn't a small editing choice. It's a decision that shapes how an entire generation of new fans, many of whom are meeting Bob Marley's story for the first time through this film, will understand his personal life. Damian never publicly commented on why his mother wasn't included, and that silence, more than anything else, is probably what kept this story alive as long as it did. There's also a broader pattern worth noting here, one that goes beyond just this specific rumor. Those two approaches were always going to create some friction once a film like this got made, even without anyone being at odds personally. It's also worth remembering just how connected these brothers actually are publicly and musically, outside of this one controversy. In 2025, all 5 of Bob Marley's musical sons, Ziggy, Stephen, Damian, Kymani, and Julian, reunited for the Legacy Tour, their first time performing together in 2 decades. The timing lined up with what would have been their father's 80th birthday, and the shows were built specifically around showcasing each brother's individual voice within their father's shared legacy. At their stop in Chula Vista, California, the five brothers opened with a video tribute to Bob before trading verses on classics like Get Up, Stand Up, and Iron Lion Zion, rotating lead vocals song by song in a clearly rehearsed, collaborative structure. Ziggy opened one stretch of the set with Coming In from the Cold, handing off to Julian for Positive Vibrations, then to Kaimani, then Steven, then Damian, each brother taking his turn before passing along again. They closed the main set together on Exodus and came back for an encore of Could You Be Loved and One Love. Collectively, the five brothers hold 22 Grammy Awards between them, and the tour was as much a statement of unity as it was a concert. That's not the behavior of a family in the middle of a genuine, bitter falling out. It's the behavior of siblings who, whatever tension exists behind closed doors, still choose to show up for each other on stage, in front of thousands of people, sharing a legacy none of them takes lightly. So where does that leave the actual question people wanted answered? Was there a real rift between Ziggy and Damian Marley over the One Love biopic? Based on everything that's actually been said on the record by the people involved, the honest answer is, probably not in the way the rumors described it. Ziggy has directly denied any fallout and described daily contact with his brothers. Damian himself has not made any public comment confirming a feud, an absence of comment that has been read multiple ways, but is not, on its own, evidence of a rift. What is confirmed is that Damian didn't attend premieres, didn't promote the film, and that his mother was left out of the final cut. Those are facts. Whether they add up to a personal conflict between the brothers, or simply reflect Damian's well-known tendency to stay out of projects he wasn't directly involved in creatively, is something only the family itself truly knows. What this story really shows is how quickly speculation about a famous family can outrun the facts, especially when the people involved aren't saying much and the public is left to connect dots on its own. It's a pattern that shows up again and again with the Marley family specifically, because Bob's legacy is so enormous, so commercially valuable, and so emotionally significant to millions of fans worldwide that any perceived crack gets magnified instantly. A missed premiere becomes a feud. A quiet social media account becomes a scandal. An editing decision about screen time becomes proof of a family conspiracy. Sometimes the real story is simply more complicated and much less dramatic than the version that goes viral. Damian Marley has spent his entire career stepping out of his father's shadow while still honoring where he came from, building a sound and an identity that's unmistakably his own, from Welcome to Jamrock, to his Grammy-winning collaborations with Nas on Distant Relatives, to his work with Steven across multiple albums. Ziggy has spent his career as both a musician and a steward of his father's name, taking on production responsibilities and public representation duties that inevitably put him in the middle of decisions like who gets cast, what gets included, and what the final story looks like on screen. Those two roles were bound to create some tension around a project as high stakes as this one. But tension around a film and a genuine, lasting rift between brothers are not automatically the same thing, no matter how convenient that headline might be. Ultimately, stories like this tend to resolve themselves not through dramatic confessions, but through time. A year from now, if Damian and Ziggy are still performing together, still crediting each other in interviews, and still showing up for family milestones, the rift rumor will likely be remembered the way most celebrity feud rumors are, as noise that never matched reality. And if there is more to the story, something neither brother has addressed publicly yet, it will most likely come out on their own terms, not through speculation pieced together from red carpet absences and quiet Instagram accounts. At the end of the day, the Marley name carries a weight that very few families in music history have ever had to manage, and every choice made about how to tell Bob Marley's story publicly is going to be scrutinized from every possible angle. Ziggy addressed the rumors directly and denied a feud. The tour footage from just months later shows all five brothers sharing a stage, trading verses, and clearly still operating as a unit. Until one of the people actually involved says otherwise on the record, the most accurate conclusion is the least sensational one: a busy schedule, a difficult creative decision about screen time, and a family that, whatever disagreements may exist privately, chose to keep showing up for each other anyway. If you found this breakdown useful, let us know what you think really happened behind the scenes, and stick around for our next video, where we dig deeper into the Marley family's musical legacy and the brothers who are carrying it forward. Blended families, especially ones built across multiple relationships the way Bob Marley's was, often face an unfair double standard in the media. A single missed event gets treated as proof of dysfunction in a way it simply wouldn't for a more conventional family structure. Bob had children with several different women, each of whom raised their kids in very different circumstances, and yet all 7 of his musical children have managed to build careers, maintain relationships with each other, and even tour together decades later. That's not a small achievement, and it's arguably a stronger data point about the family's actual unity than any single interview or public appearance. What makes this story genuinely interesting isn't a manufactured scandal. It's the fact that it sits at the intersection of 2 things that rarely mix cleanly: massive commercial film project and a real family with real internal dynamics, expectations, and history. Ziggy has spent much of his career as a caretaker of his father's public legacy. Damian has spent his building something distinctly his own, often drawing on his mother's side of the story and his own upbringing in ways that don't always align neatly with the official family narrative that a studio biopic needs to tell in 2 hours. For months, whispers followed the release of one of the biggest music biopics in recent memory. Behind the scenes of Bob Marley, One Love, fans and insiders began asking the same uncomfortable question. Was there a real rift tearing through reggae's most famous family? One brother was suddenly nowhere to be seen. No red carpet appearances. No social media posts. No public support for a film that was supposed to celebrate his own father's legacy. So what was really going on between Ziggy and Damian Marley? Today, we're breaking down the full story, separating what was actually said from what the internet assumed, and finally getting to the truth. To understand why this rumor spread so fast, you have to understand who these 2 men are within the Marley family itself. Bob Marley left behind an enormous musical legacy, and, just as famously, a large and complicated family. He had 11 children, 9 of them biological, and 7 who went on to build their own careers in music. Ziggy is the eldest son, and for decades he's carried a certain responsibility as the family's most visible spokesperson. He led the Melody Makers through the 1980s alongside his siblings Sharon, Cedella, and Stephen, and he's remained closely tied to preserving and managing his father's public image and estate. Damian, on the other hand, is the youngest of Bob's children, and in many ways, the most commercially successful reggae artist of his generation. He never got the chance to know his father, who passed away when Damian was only 2 years old. He was raised in Stony Hill, an affluent Kingston neighborhood, by his mother Cindy Breakspear, a former Miss World, and her husband, a lawyer and politician. Damian has spoken candidly about growing up as the only person of color in his own household, absorbing his father's music and his father's politics from a distance, while being raised in a completely different world. It's a background that shaped his identity and in many ways shaped the fierce, socially conscious sound that eventually became his signature. Where his brothers built on the Melody Makers' more traditional reggae foundation, Damian carved his own lane, blending reggae with dancehall and hip-hop, and became the first Jamaican reggae artist to win 2 Grammys in a single night. So when Bob Marley, One Love was announced, both brothers had very different levels of involvement. Ziggy and his sister Cedella served as executive producers on the film, giving them direct creative influence over how their father's story would be told, including who would play him. Notably, none of the Marley brothers auditioned for the lead role. Instead, the producers chose British actor Kingsley Ben-Adir after being impressed by his audition, a decision that drew some early criticism from people who felt a Jamaican actor, or one of Bob's own sons, should have been given the part. The film opened on Valentine's Day and became a genuine box office success, pulling in over $51 million and setting a record for the biggest Valentine's Day opening in history. That commercial win quieted a lot of the casting criticism, but a new controversy quickly took its place. Cindy Breakspear, Damian's mother, was left out of the film's final cut entirely. For a movie built around Bob Marley's personal life and relationships, her absence stood out, especially to fans who knew her history with Bob and her influence on some of his most famous songs. Add to that Damian's complete absence from every premiere, in Jamaica and internationally, along with his silence about the film across all of his social media platforms. And the pieces seemed to fit a narrative that wrote itself.